what's compelling them to buy. So our data scientists have been analyzing all of the search marketing data to humanize each and every click. So here's a sampling of our client list. As you can see, retail has been a strong focus for Elixir, and we've broken into the travel industry as well, and also have a search marketing partnership with UPS that we're very excited about. But the big thing to mention here, as far as our clients, is no two businesses are alike. So regardless of whomever we work with, we create a customized strategy for each one. So quickly about Elixir University, we were launched in 2012 with a vision of democratizing the digital marketing industry through exceptional knowledge and expertise sharing. And our goal here has been to share the best practices in retail and digital marketing with 10,000 businesses worldwide by the end of this year in 2015. We invite you to join our group, Elixir University, on LinkedIn. You can either search for us there, Elixir University, or use the link below to find our group. Our speakers today are going to be Udayan Bose, who is the founder and CEO of Elixir, also was one of the founders of PartyBingo.com, and he has been a guest lecturer at the Johnson School of Management at Cornell University, City University of New York, Baruch, as well as the Indian School of Business. And here's his LinkedIn information if you'd like to contact him directly. Our other speaker today is going to be Don Rodriguez. He is the director here at Elixir of Analytics and Account Strategy. He believes that marketing is all about the math, and that is very clear with his former career in electrical engineering. He also teaches. He teaches MBA classes at Rutgers University. And if you'd like to connect with him on LinkedIn, here is his contact information. So we're going to jump right into the presentation. First, Udayan Bose is up, talking about PLA profit zone methodology. Udayan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Marin. Hi, everyone. I wanted to just quickly introduce or give you a context for this research that actually Don Rodriguez led. So everyone knows about the exponential increase in terms of PLAs. We at Elixir, being fanatically analytical, do a lot of research constantly. And a lot of our research really points to the different segments of PLAs, product listing ads, and we're able to see an enormous spike in the PLA contribution to the overall paid search contribution. So while discussing with Don, a fundamental question is what really sort of bewildered or something that we didn't really have an answer to. And that question was, how does the PLA strategy differ from retail category to category? I mean, should the PLA strategy be the same for someone who specializes in home furnishings versus someone who is in the pet supplies industry? And one of the fundamental things, or probably the most fundamental thing, when you really talk of strategy, is how much are you really willing to invest to really get a certain return back? So that's I think the quick context behind today's webinar and the research presentation which Don is going to be doing. So what we are trying to do is, this is actually the first time, I believe, in my knowledge, that any agency worldwide has really tried to come up by defining as to what is the percentage of your overall paid search spend which should be invested in PLAs for maximizing profitability. So let me repeat this. This is the first in world research on mathematically finding out the profit zone as to how much of your total paid search spend should be invested in PLAs so that you are able to maximize your profits. So let me quickly describe the overall method that we really used. And actually, I shouldn't even say we, because though other than the conversation which I had with Don, I must say it is entirely Don and his team of fanatically analytical group which has really done this research. So we started with 13 hypotheses. Now, some of them are pretty broad, and I'll sort of go into each one of them as well. We aggregated 2 years of AdWords performance data, because if you really look at it, the PLAs were launched in 2012 August. And so effectively 2013 and 2014 data was quite substantive, because we were able to actually track the emergence of PLAs. And when I say track the emergence of PLAs, let me give you a quick demo of what exactly I mean. So we at NetElixir have our own proprietary customer intelligence technology, which is called the Elixir Insights. Now, Elixir Insights enables us to really look at the overall channel-wise mix, contributions, ROI, etc., etc. So I'll just give you a quick rundown and quick example or demo as to what exactly this really looked like. Yeah. So effectively, again, this is typically how the overall PLA contribution and the PLA numbers really sort of changed. So for those of you who probably may have missed this, let me share with you. So effectively, this shows that the movement of Bing, Google Base or Google PLAs or Google Shopping and Google side by side. So it gives you a relative understanding. But if you really want to look at only Google Base or Google Shopping, I'll sort of try to share that with you as well. If you look at only Google Shopping, and let us do this tracking again, we were seeing a very clear movement of Google Shopping and the entire track. So this really tracks the average order value and the conversion movement on a month-by-month basis for the Jan 2013 to December 2014 for the animals and pet categories. So it was very, very clear that the overall conversions, AOV, profitability, things of this nature really sort of kept on changing. And we wanted to decipher through a scientific method or a research as to how much really it changed. So let me get back to the presentation really quick. So that was just to give you a context as to what really sort of changed. Moving on, I mean, overall, in terms of the analysis, it was a pretty rigorous study that Don undertook. He and his team analyzed over 1 billion impressions, which accounted for roughly about $60 million in overall cost per click or PPC transactions as such. They further subdivided the study into 6 different categories: the B2B, gifts, home furnishings, hobby, health and beauty, and apparel. So let me sort of try to explain some of the hypotheses that we started. We'll be sharing this presentation link with all the attendees. So don't really bother sort of taking notes at this time because we'll be sort of getting the information. But let me sort of highlight some of the key hypotheses really quick. So I think the first hypothesis was, I mean, the first one is probably a no-brainer. All online retailers should be using PLA. So I'll not really even sort of discuss too much about that. The second part is what was really interesting, that the PLA behavior varies dramatically by the types of business. So again, if you are pet supplies, there is a different strategy that you need in PLAs compared to if you are, let us say, selling jewelry, right? The other thing which was pretty interesting was how does the PLA spend and revenue vary by month within the market segments. So what is the overall monthly trend? Let us say during holiday season, should people invest more for a higher ROI versus the non-holiday season, etc. We also wanted to check elements like the average order value and the basket size. And we wanted to compare it, again, very interestingly, with the non-trademark and trademark campaigns. Now, again, when you talk about PPC, again, in a very simplistic sense, is broken down into non-brand and brand campaigns, or non-trademark and trademark campaigns. So Don and team wanted to compare as to how does the PLA performance compare to non-trademark and trademark. So that's just to give you a quick summary in terms of what exactly sort of are some of the things that has done. I can keep on going through the list, but I don't really want to take more time of Don. So let me hand over to Don. I have just one more slide, which probably is more of a data slide to really sort of go through. So all these are pretty interesting numbers. For example, let us say 12.8% was essentially the share of paid search. I mean, essentially the PLA-driven spend divided by the total PPC spend. 15% that you see in the second tier or the second rung is in fourth quarter. PLAs accounted for 15% of the overall sales revenue for all of our clients, which all of them happen to be, again, as Marine has mentioned, retailers, except for we have some travel category, which we sort of take it separately. 31.6% is the year-on-year growth in the number of orders in PLAs, so you can see the exponential growth. 37.5% is in Q4, it sort of grew by about 37.5%, the number of orders from PLAs. 38.4% again is the year-on-year growth in revenues from PLAs, so that has been sort of constantly booming. 49% is the highest paid search revenue share that any one of our client has, specifically on Google Shopping. So let us say out of every $100 that they earn from paid search revenue, again we are talking about the last click out here, 49% happens to be contributed by PLAs, and the last statistic is 67.1%, which is in 2014 the year-on-year revenue, the quarterly growth in PLAs was 67.1%. Well, let me hand over to Don to really sort of share with you the study, the research. I have a quick request. At the end of the presentation, we can extend it for 5 minutes if you have questions, but I can assure you that each and every of your questions would be answered by us, specifically contributing to the research. Don?
Probably one of the most frequently asked questions of any agency is, what percentage of my spend is incremental? And we particularly hear this a lot with product ads. So we attempted to assess that in this study, and this is how we did that. We identified accounts that did not have PLAs running in some time periods in 2013 and in 2014, so that we could calculate a rate of growth, a benchmark rate of growth. We then identified time periods in 2014 when those accounts had PLAs running versus a time in 2013 when they did not. That way we could compare the year-over-year changes, which I'll show you here. And you can see the growth, for example, in impressions went from 8% without PLAs to 51% year-over-year with PLAs. And you can see the other changes as well, but focus on the 8 and the 51 because that's the example I'm going to use and show you how we sort of deconstructed this incrementality. This chart compares the 2013 to 2014 time period when PLAs were running in those accounts, right? So for example, this number here is the number of impressions that occurred in those accounts in 2013, right? They didn't have PLAs then. And then had that 8% growth rate continued, it would have amounted to this amount of impressions. But we added PLAs on top of that, which added another 28%, right? And if you remember, the total growth was 51%, so that left 15% in what I call unexplained growth, right? Which is really what led us to the conclusion that PLAs are largely incremental. If PLAs were cannibalistic, you would not see 15% of growth unexplained, for example, right? So you heard Uday cite some pretty impressive stats, and now you know that they're incremental, so what's next, right? Well, this is the most important message that I have for today, is that you need to be very strategic about your use of PLAs, and here's why. Uday mentioned that last year, approximately 13% of all paid search revenue in this study came from PLAs. 23% of the spend was on PLAs. Those aren't experiment and test numbers. So you have to be smart about how you're spending that. Now let's look at that return on ad spend, 2.37, right? So what's important about that number? Well, if you're running campaigns at 2.37 ad spend, your gross margins better be north of 40%. Otherwise, you're going to be losing money on those transactions, right? So that's why you need to be smart about this. If your gross margins are 20 or 30%, you're going to have to be very strategic in your approach to PLAs. Third thing I want to show you, I've highlighted 4 metrics where PLAs outperform their non-trademark brethren, right? You can see the 23% is less than half the share of spend of non-trademark. The return on ad spend is almost double. Conversion rate is up about 10%, and the cost per order is less than half. So one of the questions you should be asking yourself is, do I have the right mix between my PLAs and my non-trademark campaigns? And before I move on, one thing you might notice, Udayan had mentioned that AOV and basket size were one of our hypotheses. And we have some theories behind that, which you can read about in the white paper. Another hypothesis is that performance varies by business type. So here are pictures comparing the revenue percentage contribution and the cost or spend percentage contribution for each of those 6 markets that we studied. So each of those graphs contains about 2 years of data points. What we did is we plotted each month the percentage of cost and percentage of revenue. And the first thing you should notice is that all of those curves look different, right? For example, over here in B2B, over here in hobby, and a little bit up here, for example, in gifts, you can see that the law of diminishing returns may apply. Whereas in sector like health and beauty, it's moving up and to the right pretty consistently, right? And it was these charts which led to our discovery of what we call the PLA sales and profit zone. So let me explain what I mean by that. The green bar is the period where that curve was relatively linear, right? So for example, someone spending 20% of their ad budget, about 1/5 of their ad budget, was generating a little less than 20% of their revenue from that spend. But here's the key insight. They could have increased that share of ad budget by adding dollars or shifting dollars all the way up there to almost 45% and gotten a proportional increase in their revenue share. So that red triangle is the untapped sales and profit potential. That's your PLA sales and profit zone. So you should be asking yourself, well, do I have a PLA sales and profit zone, right? Does my chart look like that, right? Those are some of the important questions you should be asking yourself. And here are some more. Oh, before I get to that, here's what those pictures look like for each of those 6 diagrams I showed you before, right? So now here are some of those important questions. How does your PLA performance compare to your non-trademark performance? Is it like those in our study where some metrics it was better, some metrics it was worse? Is there room to improve your PLA performance? I'm showing you here on the right. This is a picture of our Elixir Tools custom bid management interface. And the reason I'm showing you that is to give you an example of how we're going about improving performance for one of our clients. When we were looking at their performance by ad group, we noticed that we had some ad groups that were generating the return on ad spend target we had set up for our campaigns. But when we analyzed the cost per order, we found out that they were actually losing money on the transaction because the AOVs were low. So using custom bid management, we're setting 2 conditions. We're going to set the return on ad spend target and a cost per order target. That way we can ensure every transaction that's generated by those ad groups is profitable for her business. Another important question, are you following known best practices, right? Why are best practices important? Best practices are important because that's how you generate performance, right? So here are some key best practices to keep in mind. This is a picture of a typical PLA ad for one of our favorite makeups. First and foremost, you have to do your SEO for PLAs. I can't stress that enough. You need to optimize your titles and your description for query matching. So let me tell you a couple stories here. I highlighted the title for that product from our client, Glow Professional. And you can see we sort of had a very clever way of adding their brand name into the title with the GLO in the front. We did this just recently. So we optimized their title and we optimized their descriptions. And one thing I like to note, we got an additional word which might mean something to some end user, the word powder, that none of the other competitors have showing in their ad. Our impressions almost doubled. We didn't change a thing other than title and description. No bid changes, no ad group changes. All we did was change the content of those 2 fields, and we got almost a doubling of impressions. Okay, and the skeptics in the audience are saying impressions, big deal. It's conversions that count. So let me tell you this one. Another one of our accounts went through the same process, title and description optimization. And that number you see there is the growth in conversion rate. I repeat, growth in conversion rate. More than 4 times better just by doing SEO for PLAs. I can't stress that enough. Another thing, you have to use the merchant promotion feeds. This is a free tool from Google. How often do you get free tools from Google, right? You can see here we have a free shipping over $65 offer with Grow Professional. It doesn't have to be an offer. It could be any one of your unique selling propositions. All you do is put a start date and an end date, and then you update it again next month with the same content, right? Note here, there are only 2 vendors with special offers out of 5. It makes you look different. It increases your click-through rate. It's a no-brainer. Another no-brainer, keep your feed fresh. You talk to any of our account managers, they're going to tell you that they like to upload the feed every day or at least once a week. They don't care if it's been changed or not. They have seen by keeping the feed fresh, performance is improved or maintained. And last, and certainly not least, leverage the benchmarking tools you have for optimizing your bid strategies. Here's a picture of the benchmarking in AdWords where they give you a benchmark click-through rate, CPC, and search impression share. And this is a view of the benchmarking data that's available to you in Google Analytics. Why is this important? Well, we have another account where we have used this strategy in a tiered bid management approach. And the last time we went and adjusted the bids, this is what happened. Double-digit growth in sales and orders just by leveraging the benchmark information that's there for free. It's there. All right, so why is benchmarking important? Why is best practices important? Because it optimizes your performance, right? That's what it's all about. And in retail, it's all about gross margin dollars per whatever key metric you have. Brick and mortar, it's per square foot. Catalog, it's per square inch of catalog page. Well, guess what? In PLAs, it's per square inch of search engine result page. You're trying to squeeze as many dollars out of that 33% share of the page as you can. That's what it's about. So how do you maximize margin dollars? You maximize margin dollars by taking margin dollars per transaction and maximizing the number of transactions. So let's look at the first variable first. How are you doing that? Here's a nice graphic I borrowed from our friends at Google, for example. How are you going to maximize your margin dollars? Well, you maximize your return on ad spend. That's going to have a margin impact, right? And how do you maximize your return on ad spend? You do it with smart bid management. I also like this example because it shows you that diminishing returns may apply with your bids. In this case, they go from 65 cents to $1, and their return on ad spend grows. They bump it up to $1.15. It shrinks, right? Oh, by the way, side note, if you're using any kind of automation, for example, like the Elixir custom bid management I showed you before, your bid should never get to the $1.15 because if you have your target set for 3.2, it'll stop at $1, right? So now let's talk about the second variable, right? Number of transactions. We all know in retail it's all about inventory turns, right? So how are you going to maximize your inventory turns? You maximize your inventory turns by finding your PLA sales and profit zone. Here's another nice graphic that I borrowed from our friends at Google. This is looking at CPC versus profit. And you can see here where that little red X is, if you eliminated your CPC there, you leave all this green on the table, right? So to maximize your turns, right, you want to make sure you're operating in your PLA profit zone.
So Don, let me, this is Udayan, guys. So I wanted, this is a very important concept which Don has presented. And I really wanted to sort of ask a question to Don. So Don, if our attendees are to implement this process on a step-by-step basis, what would those steps look like? What should they be doing first? I mean, what is the number one step that they need to do?
You have to go, first you want to map your revenue and your spend over time and look at the relationship between the cost and the revenue share, right, just like I showed you in those scatter charts, right? Second thing you're going to do, how do your bids compare to the industry benchmark bids, right, using that benchmark tool? That's the second thing you ought to do, right? And if you find that yourself that you do have a sales and profit zone opportunity, then you look at the ways you want to increase that spend, right? And you want to increase that spend smartly. So for example, spending money on products that have higher margin, higher sales velocity versus lower. I mentioned the tiered bid strategy before from one of our clients. They have their product feed organized in 3 levels: low performance, medium performance, high performance, right? And the bids scale appropriately. based on that. And that's how they generated that 23 and 25% increase that you saw.
Thank you. This is very, very helpful. I think we are looking at a pretty substantial, a big idea out here. The big idea is manage your SERP as you would your retail store, essentially, right? So we call this maximizing the value of SERP as to where exactly in the SERP does your PLA fit in, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you, Don. Very helpful. Please, back to Don.
Okay. Let me just wrap this up before I hand it back to Marin for the Q&A. All right, so first, don't forget, ask those strategic questions. Adopt these best practices. Find your own PLA sales and profit zone. Shameless plug, read my white paper. Here are a couple case studies from our friends at Google. And oh, by the way, please fill out your webinar survey at the end that you're going to get via email. In that survey, we ask if you want to have a copy of the white paper sent to you. All right, and with that, I will return it back to Marin for the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Don and Dan. This was really so fascinating. And we wanted to open the floor now to some questions. So with the time we have left, and then any questions we don't get to, we'll certainly reach out to you directly to answer them. Let's see here. Start with, okay. So Don, when analyzing PLA campaign performance, there is a trend of increased conversion rates during our regular business hours when the phones are also open. How beneficial is it to set up bid adjustments for all PLA campaigns to mirror conversion rates over a 24-hour period? So,
Chris, I would just, I think that's from Chris,
yeah,
right? Right?
Yes.
Chris, I would just tell you that day parting is a valid and smart strategy for any campaign you're running, right? We do that all the time. We have campaigns, for example, some of our like B2B customers, we don't run ads on the weekends because it doesn't pay, right? We don't run ads after 7 o'clock p.m. because it doesn't pay, right? So day parting is a perfectly valid strategy on anything, and obviously on PLAs as well. I hope that answers your question.
All right, thank you, Don. So what are your projections for the percentage of PLA spend for the apparel category by the end of this year?
Sorry, I'm sorry. I'd actually have to take a look at that.
Yeah, so this is Udayan. So overall, I can sort of project this one. So overall, we are looking at an overall for the apparel category, a percentage PLA spend. So like percentage of PLA spend divided by total paid search spend, up close to about 40% specifically during the holiday season. End of the year for entire 2015, it will probably sort of work out to about 28 to 30%. So again, just to sort of repeat, the question was, what are your projections for percentage PLA spend? So how much of your paid search spend should be invested on PLAs for apparel category specifically? And our projection is for the entire year, it will probably be about 28 to 30%. Holiday season, it will be upwards of 40%.
Oh, thank you. Okay. All right, and we got time for one more question. Don, why did you look at revenue percentage and cost percentage?
The reason we could, well, two reasons. One, obviously there's a relationship between your amount of spend and the return you get. But I guess more importantly, it allows us basically to sort of like self-index, comparing, yourself against yourself, so that the changes between industry, the changes between one account to another, for lack of a better word, get normalized into the data, right? So that's why we looked at the share of revenue versus the share of the spend.
All right, thank you so much, Don. All right, so looks like we're out of time. Thank you so much. Just wanted to mention again that we're happy to share a copy of the white paper with all attendees. But we are going to be sending out, as Don had mentioned, a quick survey after our webinar. We want to hear your feedback and some ideas for upcoming webinars. And also there is where you're going to provide your contact information so we can send the research paper to you. We're happy to share it. We love sharing knowledge, but just let us know, where to send it. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. I hope you found this beneficial. Any additional questions, you can always contact me, Marin@netelixir.com. We really appreciate your time today, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.